Casey, welcome back to Cinema Snorkel.
You know, Carlin, it's a treat to be here once again.
I feel the same way. I feel like recording this with you is the best part of my week.
It's a treat. It's a treat, I say. You know, hopefully the people listening feel the same, but it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's a treat for us.
We're still moving down our IMDb top 250 list.
As we do, ever so slowly.
But I'm very excited to have so early gotten to one of my favorite movies of all time. Would you say it's yours? I'd say it's top 5 for me, for sure.
Absolutely.
Let me get this straight. You think that your client, one of the wealthiest, most powerful men in the world, is secretly a vigilante who spends his nights beating criminals to a pulp with his bare hands? And your plan is to blackmail this person?
I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? Go back to ripping off mob dealers? No. You complete me.
You're garbage who kills for money.
Don't talk like one of them. You're not. Even if you'd like to be.
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
It's hard to overstate what an impact this movie had on millennial men. Like, I was 13 when this movie hit theaters, and I can confidently say it formed a huge piece of my personality.
Which piece? The wannabe skater grunge piece?
No, I don't even, this movie was cooler than that. It was cooler even than that. It wasn't about skater and grunge. It was like, okay, I'm into deep movies. I actually remember being like, Christopher Nolan is now my favorite director because this is so thought-provoking. And all my buddies felt the same. And on my iPod Shuffle, Gen 1, the one that looked like a thumb drive with my wired headphones, as I raked leaves with my buddy Drew, we were like, okay, let's each listen to the Hans Zimmer soundtrack as we rake these leaves, and then we'll talk about like what we like about it after. So we like raked his whole yard and we listened to Hans Zimmer.
That sounds like a great day.
That was a great day.
Yeah, I remember being just enthralled by the symbolism, sifting through all the foreshadowing. This movie is very enjoyable. I was thinking as I was watching it, the plot points themselves all make sense and they all flow into each other. But even if you're not really tracking, it still lands, because essentially it's kind of like an aerial shot of two people walking through a corn maze, and you're watching them stumble towards each other, and you're waiting for them to like bump up into each other.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Go on.
So we see Harvey Dent start in one corner, and we see him blundering in a direction, and then what happens when he encounters the Joker, and what happens when the Joker encounters Maroni, and we're kind of watching. Their paths actually do make sense. Like, the plot does make sense. All the puzzle pieces fit together like a tight wall of Legos. But even if you're not picking up on all those threads, you're still like hit with the impact of the characters' story arcs.
Yeah.
So it's working on many levels. As deep as you want to go, it can go that deep with you.
That's so good. And beyond just the impact on us personally, this movie was a genre creator. It basically took Batman, who had fallen on some hard times, it's safe to say, and made him like a serious, believable figure. The last Batman movie before this, I don't want to traumatize anyone, but it was the 1997 George Clooney Batman and Robin, 12% on Rotten Tomatoes. Notorious batsuit that had like nipples, like really prominent nipples. George Clooney literally couldn't move his head. If you think Christian Bale can't move his head, George Clooney could not move his head.
Is that a wink at that movie?
I actually was going to say, when Lucius Fox says, you want to be able to turn your head, I personally think that that's totally a jab at the 1997 George Clooney Batman, where, for example, he's laying in the bed while Poison Ivy's kind of being flirty with him or whatever, but all he can do is look his eyes to the right. and kind of like awkwardly like move his whole upper self, like his whole upper torso away. And it's hilariously bad.
Well, look, some people love it.
Who are those people? I'd love to meet them, shake their hand. And before that, Carlin, you had the 1960s Batman, which is the definition of campy. In fact, you can look up a compilation of every time Robin says, "Holy caboozle! Holy hand grenades, Batman! Holy wow, Batman!" It's like 700 quotes long. It's like a 10-minute compilation of Robin just being like, "Holy wow! Holy zappa zappa!" He's just saying words.
That captures a bit of the original. Okay, I'm not a comic book girl. You probably know more about it than I do. The impression that I get is that take captures some of the campiness of the comics, which are fantastic and silly. But The Dark Knight captures the other side of the comics, which is actual depth of character and themes and metaphor. Is it safe to say that they both kind of they both pay homage to the comic books in their own ways?
I think so. The original comics came out in the 1930s, and everything was old-timey. In the 30s, you know, he's a detective. It's the Detective Batman series, but Batman's been made and remade, and I do think the 60s kind of added a weirdness all their own to Batman that didn't maybe exist there before. But you also have like all the cartoons that Batman's been in. In the 90s, there were some incredible cartoons made of Batman. If anything, I think that's what Christopher Nolan was drawing on. Ironically, the animated cartoons captured more of that like serious, believable side of Batman than any of the live actions had up to that point. But regardless, 2008 or actually 2005, Batman Begins set the genre for, I would argue, not just Batman, but really leading into the MCU and like taking superheroes seriously as a genre. You had the Sam Raimi Spider-Man released 2002 or something. So it was this wave that was beginning to crest. But Sam Raimi Spider-Man is like lighthearted and hilarious, and I think maybe the best Spider-Man movie. I still hold to that, but it's definitely got a lighter tone. Chris Nolan was the one who was like, no, superheroes can grapple with the deepest themes.
Yeah.
Anyway, in some ways, the DC universe never recovered to its detriment, and they're like overly serious. So we can ignore all that and just focus on this masterpiece of a film.
One thing I like about it is, even though it's a sequel, it totally stands alone, and we don't have to really waste any time discovering who Batman is, why he is. It's like we're starting out, we all know, and even if you've never seen Batman Begins, we all know Bruce Wayne, his origin story. We also don't waste time talking about his origin story, as important as that is. But this movie cuts right to the chase.
They never mention his parents once.
And I love it for it.
What do you like about this movie on this rewatch? What stood out to you?
Okay, I just love that absolutely nothing in this film is wasted.
Yeah.
Every line, every camera shot, every extra, like, everything is driving towards this ultimate clash of 4, 5, 6, 7 amazing characters that have dramatic changes that are believable. I mean, I don't know if Harvey Dent's transformation is quite as believable, but all the other characters, I'm like fully invested.
You're there for it. Yeah.
I'm there for it. And, you know, I can forgive the Harvey Dent, like, dramatic change because he goes through a horrible life trauma. You know.
Why not?
So that, and then I also love that the scenes are fun to watch on multiple levels. Like I said earlier, even if you're not tracking with every nitty-gritty detail of the plot, you can still get hit with the amazingness of the story.
I think the secret sauce of this movie truly is the villain. I think I'm realizing that more and more. Villains tend to drive incredible stories and can salvage even mediocre heroes. And they can cause good heroes to just to pop as they rise to meet the challenge. But
oh my gosh.
The Joker is arguably the best villain ever devised for film. And the way they set him up, starting with the opening scene, with the opening heist, just open on a building with that string music, Hans Zimmer going crazy in the background, and it's escalating, and it's like a train gathering speed. And you watch the Joker double cross all these guys on a low level, and when he pulls off the Joker mask to reveal the real Joker underneath, I just think that's an incredible character reveal and sets us up for an amazing ride for the rest of the film. The scene with the Joker and the mob when he walks in, and then you get to see more of his intelligence, because they're all kind of bluffing and talking around stuff and like coming up with bad coping mechanisms for Batman. Let's move all our money to one big pot, and like, I already did it. They don't respect each other, right? I think that's some of what that communicates, is like, the Lau, the banker, their accountant who lives in Hong Kong, is like, I obviously couldn't wait for your permission. I went ahead and transferred all the money for you. So it shows us that the mobs are weak, and the Joker walks in and he's like, I know why you have your therapy sessions during broad daylight. He's actually speaking real truth to them. And then he's like, we could follow the television's plan.
Iconic.
It's just like, okay, again, we're setting up, this is a new class of villain, and that whole scene is masterfully done. From the gross magic trick he does, makes the pencil disappear. Again, they don't show us, they're not relying on gore, they're showing us who the Joker is.
Disturbing without being gory.
Yes. All the way to his exit plan, that is what you're learning to expect from the Joker. He's always a step ahead of everybody. So he's got a plan to get out of there. And it's his self-detonation, vest or whatever.
And he doesn't care to be laughed at. I mean, that's what makes him so terrifying, is all the scenes, like in that moment, they're all laughing at him. He doesn't care, because obviously he is 10 steps ahead. But nothing works on him. Like all the times the Joker gets brutally beat up.
Yeah.
Like especially that scene when Batman's interrogating him, or the cops interrogating him, and he's just laughing. He's like, you can't do anything to me. I have no currency.
Oh, man.
It's infuriating. And Bruce underestimates him, but Alfred sees he's the only one, and his words kind of haunt us, like, some men just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah. Alfred's the real one. He understands what's happening.
Oh, Alfred!
Yeah, there's so many things we could talk about that we like. I mean, they build suspense, like with his calling card, and that keeps showing up. Like when the judge finds that in her ledger during the court case, and she just goes, moves it aside. Okay, right there, the audience is terrified, because we don't know what the Joker's going to do, but we know it's going to be bad.
Right. And on the next level, that's actually him collecting her DNA.
Wow.
On the card, because the calling card is what he gives to the police, and the 3 sets of DNA on the calling card. See what I mean?
Oh my gosh, I never realized that.
It's foreshadowing. It's like a joke, because his card is a playing card. It's like,
it's got no info on it. Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's Legos.
And the paradox of the Joker is that he's a guy who literally always has a plan, and it's always in motion, and his actions don't make any sense. So another iconic line is when they're in the major crimes unit lockup, which is Jim Gordon's private fortress. He's got all of his people, quote unquote, there. So it's a safer place than the county jail, which is corrupt and people slip in and out, and whatever. You can't control what happens.
You can't protect people from getting killed.
Brutally
by your
killed.
Dirty cops. Yeah.
But in the major crimes unit, he thinks he can. And the Joker gets that detective to try to beat him up or whatever, comes out with him at knife point. And what does he say? I want my phone call.
Yeah.
Like, as an audience, we're like, holy crap, what's about to happen? In fact, we watched this with some of the students, and they were like, like, what's going, oh my gosh. Like, when he said that, they knew something bad was going to happen, because we know that the Joker has a plan. But the unnervingness of like, okay, why does he want a phone call?
Why is that so simple? It can't be that simple.
And it never is. So, yeah, incredible villain.
He's a madman with a plan. But one line that really crystallizes it is what he says to Harvey. And he says, I'm a dog chasing a car. I wouldn't know what to do with one if I caught it.
So, Carlin, I want to ask you about that. Do you think that the film is trying to get us to take that line seriously, because something the Joker does is he puts on a different mask for everybody.
That's true.
So when he's with the mob, playing him like a fiddle. When he's in the MCU detention, he's playing Batman. Yeah. He's goading Batman into, and it works. It's working. Batman's losing control. Yep. So he's playing everybody. He's clearly playing Harvey Dent there. He's clearly trying to break Harvey. But yeah, that line about, I'm just a dog chasing a van. I wouldn't actually know what to do if I caught up with it. Is that for effect to like, are we meant to be like, oh my gosh, he's playing Harvey. He's kind of playing a little bit innocent and actually relating with Harvey in that you and I both are now, you have always thought you're in control. Now you're out of control. You're laying here on a hospital bed. You thought you were in control. I can relate with that. I don't even know what the heck's going on. So that's one interpretation. Or is he actually leveling with us for a second?
I have a hypothesis, and I might be proven wrong by the end of this episode.
Please.
I think the Joker never lies.
Interesting.
I think he sees the world clearly, and I think he calls it how he sees it, and I think 99% of the time, he's right.
That's fascinating.
And I think he knows how to play. He knows how to wind up each character. But I think he's always being honest. Because he, like you said, he's crazy, but he's not stupid. He's morally unhinged, but he's the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
And here's how I got to that conclusion. I just divided the movie up into the 3 acts. And one of the reasons why this movie is so watchable is because it is organized in a 3-act structure, and each act has its own beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
And then they all lead up to the ultimate scene.
Ooh, say more.
So in Act 1, it starts with the heist. It's the police's plan to track the bills and to capture the mob. And then they go to Batman he has to go outside of the jurisdiction to get Lau. And because Batman works with Gordon, it's like the forming of this trio. Like the 3 of us together, we can get the mob in jail. And it's like this big triumph.
Yes.
And it sets up all these characters. And that's Act 1. But in that act, the Joker shows up to the mob, offers them this chance to get the Batman for them, and they laugh him out of the room. And he's like, okay, well, when you're ready, come to me. Act 2, the mob, they realize, amazing. Oh my gosh, we can't defeat Harvey Dent, and we can't defeat, we need the Joker. So they unleash the Joker. They set the mad dog off its leash. And the Joker, because he's the smartest man in the room and he knows everybody's motivations, he knows exactly how to get Batman. He starts killing innocent people publicly and saying, if you unmask yourself, then I'll stop killing. But Harvey and Gordon and Bruce all believe in the Batman still. They're like, we can't turn in the Batman because we still need him. Even at the expense, and Alfred calls this too. He's like, here's what you do. You endure. You take it. Right. Because that's what the Batman is. You have to be okay with feeling like you're letting people die because Gotham needs you to do that.
Yeah. Keep the mask on, Bruce. And stay the course.
And Dent also at this point believes in that, which is why he turns himself in as the Batman. And then we get a pleasant surprise. Gordon didn't actually die. And this whole act ends with they capture the Joker and put him in jail. And so that's the end of that one. But we still have Alfred's warning echoing in our ear about some men want to watch the world burn. So then in Act 3, it begins with the Joker's plan is revealed that he actually wanted to get captured because this is a plan. But he goes on TV and says, I had a dream of a world without the Batman. And it was really boring. The mob just did their small petty theft for money, and I had nobody to play with, essentially. So the Joker has, at the beginning he says, if you're good at something, never do it for free. Maybe that is a line that's not true, because that's totally just playing the mob. But he realizes he doesn't want to kill Batman. He just wants to play. He wants to start turning people bad. He wants to make them into agents of chaos because that's more interesting to him.
His first goal is to take over the mob, and he does that.
Easily. With a couple of sticks of dynamite and some bullets.
Yeah, and he's like, it's too easy. It's all too easy. All this stuff is cheap. All you care about is money. This town deserves another class of criminal.
Yeah, when he's getting interrogated, he's like, you complete me. And Batman says, you're scum, we're nothing alike. And he says, don't talk like them. You're not one of them. Even if you'd like to be.
Yeah.
They're all playing for money. They're all playing by these motivations. He's like, you and I, we're operating on a different plane. We're above all of this. But Batman at that point hasn't quite captured that. He doesn't quite see the whole picture.
He doesn't want to believe it. Because, and we can get into this, Bruce Wayne is holding out for a normal life with Rachel.
Yeah.
He wants to beat up some thugs, clean Gotham streets up, and then hang up the cape, let Harvey Dent take the baton from there so that he can actually steal Harvey's girl, Loki, but then be with Rachel. And she's like, don't make me your one hope for a normal life. But he's actually really wants it. So he's holding on to a little bit of normalcy, the rules that everyone else plays by. He hasn't committed to truly being the caped crusader who lives for justice. And the Joker is that. The Joker lives for nothing but the chaos that he wants to create. And to beat him, actually, Batman's going to have to truly lean into the Batman thing. Can't be a part-time gig. It's not something Batman can control anymore and keep in its own little lane. The city needs him, actually, to step into the arena for real with the Joker and not kill him. His temptation is to kill him, but actually more is needed to be the real hero. So, sorry. Yeah.
Yes. The only thing that's needed is he stays true to his principles.
Right. For real.
For real.
So the second act, you would say, ends with they capture the Joker, but he goes to prison. And then the third act is he wanted to be captured. Harvey Dent never made it home from the epic heist. He gets in a police car with a crooked cop, right? And then what happens in the third act?
The third act, the Joker's motivation has switched from Batman to let's just turn people into agents of chaos, which is why I think the line that he says to Harvey about being a dog that catches a car
feels true.
In a sense, he realizes I'm chasing, he switches cars. He switches his motivation from I want to kill Batman to I want to deconstruct Batman. If he can get Batman to kill, then he'll really have won, because he says, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object?
Yeah.
Joker being the unstoppable force, Batman being the immovable object. If he can get Batman to compromise on his values, then he wins. But we're kind of like, okay, but will he? Is Batman really the unstoppable force? And so he sets up this dilemma. It's always these kind of like binaries, like
this
the two
or that.
sides of the coin.
Yep.
Rachel or Harvey.
Yep.
And the Joker, he sets up these plans that are, they're brilliant, they're thoughtful, but he doesn't really care how it turns out, because either way, one of them's going to die, and he gives the wrong location, and he ends up creating, accidentally, Two-Face.
Yeah.
By killing Rachel. So then he shows up at the hospital and was like, oh, here's a fun one to play with. And then he puts a loaded gun in Harvey's hand and he spins him around and says, go for it. Let's see what happens.
Get out there, buddy. He's trying to break Batman, but he ends up breaking Harvey Dent, which we can get into when we talk about each of these characters' motivation and why Batman endures and doesn't break his one rule. But Harvey does snap, and Harvey does break his cardinal beliefs that he lives by. His rule, you could say, that he lives by.
I make my own luck.
And he realizes the world is just chaos, and I can't control it. And the only thing that's fair is to just be on the side of chaos. That's the only way I can cope with how unjust the world is. I thought I could control it. I thought we could be decent men in an indecent age, but we can't. And all I care about now is fairness. It's not about what I want. It's about what's fair. It's insanity, which is why that doesn't make any sense, really. But I'm willing to go there with the film. Again, Harvey's transformation does happen pretty abruptly. It might be this film's one flaw, but I'm willing to go there because if we dial it back and we think about what was motivating him the whole time, when he breaks, it does make sense that he would become then an agent of chaos. Anyway.
So the final act ends with he puts them on the ferry boat, and it's another binary choice. The prisoners or the ferry of innocence. And then how that pans out, I think, is where we're going to find the final, what this movie is trying to say. What is the nature of good and evil?
Ooh,
You know, is
so
there goodness
good.
in the world? Is goodness absolute? Are people always going to turn on each other?
Are they just animals who, these so-called civilized people they'll eat each other.
Right.
You know, he says that with so much relish.
Right.
That's what he believes about people.
And he really does believe it, and he's really surprised when they don't.
Well put, Carlin. I like that analysis. Even putting it into 3 acts helps clarify it for me. It puts this film in greater focus.
Hot take. Batman's no killing rule is a little bit stupid and overgeneral.
I would very much have to disagree with that. It's kind of who he is and what separates him from everyone else.
Hot take. I don't know if this is a hot take. Why did they just leave the Joker in the room with that band? Like, what was that? That felt so random and arbitrary, just for the plot to progress. I have beef.
So, Carlin, there are a few themes that I think play into this so well. And the main one I'm thinking about is rules versus chaos. So much of The Dark Knight is a clash between the forces of law and order and even the ordinary rules that human beings play by. Like the mob has a code of ethics. One of the earliest lines is like, criminals in this town used to believe something. What do you believe in, huh? What do you believe in? And there's a clash between all the rules and codes of conduct versus just chaos and that animal desire and a world where nothing actually makes sense, which is the way that the Joker lives. And every character wrestles with the tension between rules and chaos and anarchy. And we could go through one at a time and actually talk about each of those characters and see how they grapple with those themes.
I love it. Well, can we start with Rachel? How does her life get affected by that theme of law versus chaos?
You know, Rachel, along with Alfred and Lucius, are sort of grounding characters. Like they're secondary characters who we don't get to see their whole journey per se, but they're all on the side of like goodness, like lawful good. They're all anchoring us in the world of like ordinary, decent morality. Rachel is kind of Bruce's conscience a little bit. So I don't actually know how she would deal with chaos versus rules other than she reminds Bruce, like, you can't be everything. You can't do everything. Like Batman, you know, I'm waiting for a day when Batman's no longer necessary, but I actually don't think that that's possible. Like, she's very pragmatic in a sense where, like, she's just like, okay, let's just be realistic, Bruce. Like, don't make me your one hope for a normal life. I don't know how that deals with rules and chaos, but those characters serve as grounding, like, foils for Bruce / Batman to, like, ground him in reality. All 3 of them, incidentally, are the only ones who know that he's Batman.
She also has this really lovely moment when she's tied up and talking to Harvey on the phone and waiting for them to come rescue her. And when she hears them burst into the scene on Harvey's side and she realizes she's the one that's going to die, she has this very lovely, graceful acceptance. Like, it's okay. I'm going to be okay. And you're going to be okay. And like her last moments are trying to encourage Harvey and like support him in this selflessness. Like her true character shines, that she is a very gracious and lovely and strong woman.
She's committed to the rules because she's committed to goodness.
Yeah, even at her own expense.
Totally, yeah. But I think the camera lens is really obviously focused on Batman, Joker, and Dent. I think those 3 are where we really see the rules versus chaos come to a head. Because everyone else is a little more grounded. They're looking at a world with the Joker, and everyone has to make that choice, obviously. But Batman's the one where it really comes down to it because this is a recurring theme within Batman, right? It's like every Spider-Man movie is going to deal with great power, great responsibility. Every Batman movie is going to deal with, okay, I want to uphold the law. I want to do justice, but to uphold and bolster the law and rule of law, I have to work outside of the law. That's going to be the tension in every single Batman movie.
Gordon lives there comfortably. He's also pragmatic.
Right. he's willing to work with Batman even though he's on the side of law and order, because he realizes they're at war and they need someone who can be a watchful protector because they can't handle what's coming at them.
So at the beginning, the relationship between Harvey and Gordon, they're like skeptically looking at each other like, are you a good one? Can I trust you? Can I work with you? Or are you dirty? Harvey resents Gordon for having to make those moral compromises as a pragmatist. So Harvey, then I guess he's the White Knight and he's trying to always color inside the lines?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what we're meant to see in Harvey, especially at first. He always colors inside the lines. Now, there is a moment where he grabs that guy in the hospital van, takes him away, and starts threatening him with a gun.
Yeah.
And I think what that is basically foreshadowing that he's so rigid in his pursuit of justice that it's actually driving him to do irrational things. In his desire to do right, he's going to do something horribly wrong.
And then that's when Batman shows up and stops him and says, if anyone saw this, everything that you've done would
ruined.
I have to be the Dark Knight so that you can be the White Knight. You are now our symbol, which means we have to keep you unsullied. Even though Batman, Gordon, and Harvey are all fighting on the side of good, they need Harvey to be the contrast because the city of Gotham needs to believe in goodness.
Yeah, and that is their rule. That's their plan. Like the Joker says it. He's like, no one freaks out when it all goes according to plan, even if the plan is horrifying.
Yeah.
Like if a gangster kills another gangster or if a bus of soldiers blow up, everyone's fine with it. But when I threaten one little mayor, everyone loses their mind, And actually, Batman and Harvey and Gordon's plan is unorthodox, but it's the plan. And if they can stick to that, they really believe we can make this work, right? Batman's one rule, obviously, is that he won't kill anyone. I was going to ask, why is that rule important?
Great question. Right, because there's times when you're like, oh, if he had only killed the Joker when he could have, or if he'd only killed whoever, whatever. It seems like more good could be done.
Batman's rule, I think, is frequently misunderstood. Because like everyone else, I'm like, dude, just kill the Joker. I don't think Batman is against law enforcement lawfully taking people out. I think his rule is a personal rule because he's saying, in order to be the vigilante, I can't let myself become like the criminals that I'm fighting. And so I'm going to hold myself to this self-discipline rule in order to color outside the lines. Like if I don't kill anyone, then I know I can actually bend the rest of the rules like I need to get this job done. But his one rule is, I think it's an incredible piece of character building and just world building in the Batman, mythos, because it allows him to be a good guy. If he killed people, he really could go off the hinge. And imagine if he just let himself kill, okay, like you're a bad dude, boom, killed you. You're a bad dude, boom, killed you. In fact, in Robert Pattinson's, the one that he's in, the Batman, actually the distinction between him and Riddler, who they introduce, is that the Riddler is a vigilante who kills people with impunity.
Right.
He's all about vengeance, whereas Robert Pattinson needs to be about hope, something different, right? So anyway, so that's Batman. We know his rules. And then let's talk about Dent. We've alluded to this. He's all about making his own rules. I make my own rules. He's a force of nature who believes deep down that if we make our own rules, if we forge ahead, we'll be victorious.
Victorious and, would you say, rewarded? Rewarded for your goodness?
I think so. Because he's the White Knight. He's in the limelight. He's lauded for his efforts by the people who matter. He's got the girl. They applaud him in the courtroom when he dismantles that gun. That's awesome. That's the kind of stuff that makes the headlines.
Yeah.
And I think we're sympathetic to Harvey. He's not like a show pony. But I think we're meant to infer that, he's very comfortable because he has just this vanilla goodness streak. We will win. We will be rewarded. It's all going to work out. But there's a limit to that.
Yeah.
There's a limit to how far he can go in his own psyche. And we see him push to that limit by the Joker, which, as we know, his whole thing, and the audience doesn't always understand this at first, but over the course of the film, we realize his whole thing is just to break everybody's rules, to be that complete agent of chaos.
It's ultimate cynicism. Like, he sees a rule, a moral rule that someone is trying desperately to hold themselves to, and he's like, okay, well, let's put your rule up against a little test and see how it does.
Yeah. Let's see how far we can push it. Yeah, and it doesn't even matter. You could be the mob boss who loves money. You could be the mayor. You could be the police commander. He's going to push you and test you. He's the ultimate villain, truly.
Which is why I just returned to that. I like that analogy of he's a dog chasing a car, because he's smart and his plans are clever and they almost always work out. But the one consistency is that his plans don't really have an aim. The aim is just to put people in situations where they have to choose something awful.
Yes. Now, one thing on that, Carlin, I actually, and this is subjective, it's a difference of opinion. Depending on who's watching the movie, you might come away with something different. I just feel like the Joker is misleading Harvey there. I don't think that that's the crystal clear window into the Joker that we want. I think the film deliberately doesn't give us that in any one moment per se. I think because he's kind of just like, hey, Harvey, I'm laying all my cards on the table. This is what I'm about. I don't know. I don't even know. It's nothing personal. But actually, at the very end, when they're waiting for the ships to blow each other up, Batman is like, what were you trying to prove? That everyone deep down is just like you?
Oh.
And I kind of think if the film ever really tips its hand, it's only then at the very end when the Joker actually, it's not personal for him, but on the other hand, it's only personal for him. It's only about his own. Other people don't even exist to him. It's kind of only about his internal need to be the chaos. And so I think when he's talking to Harvey, he's play acting a little bit. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, just like there's a lot of truth to, well, like, for example, we see him do this. He changes his story about the scars every time.
Each time it's convincing.
Yeah. We were like, oh my gosh, wait, is this what happened to him as a child? And the answer is not really. We're not meant to know. Some men just want to watch the world burn. That's really, at the end of the day, that's what it is.
And those stories are interesting because it feels like each one is crafted for the person he's telling.
Yes.
And each one is a horrifying, like disturbing, like it's theatrical and it's meant to just make you sick, but also kind of build some empathy. It just feels like a psychopath playing, like how can I wind people up?
I think that's what it is. Yeah. So I don't really take that conversation with Harvey at face value.
Okay. Sorry, I think I might agree with you. Do you know that there's no scientific correlation between morality and intelligence?
What do you mean? That's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Psychologists have tried to determine, because I think there's a common sense kind of view where it's like, well, if you have high reasoning, you should have high moral reasoning.
Yeah.
But psychologists haven't been able to link intelligence with morality.
Yeah. That's fascinating. They're like separate tracks.
Yes. So you don't think, I mean, obviously the Joker's winding up Harvey Dent. It's a calculated gamble to get Harvey to do something rash. He's just poking the bear. But I think it's not the whole truth, but I don't know. I think he's leveling with him and he's kind of giving us.
You're right. And actually, sorry, I should have said this. I actually think I agree with your point that he never lies. But he never tells the whole truth either, because the truth just doesn't matter to him at all. Like, why would it? So in a sense, he's always lying. He's always lying.
And he's always lying. And in a sense, he's also telling the truth because the truth doesn't really matter to him. Like, he's not trying to hide his motivations.
Exactly. He doesn't care that everyone knows his motivation. He's telling everyone his motivations. The problem is they just don't believe it. And that's part of his shtick, because he's like, everyone lives in this little world where they feel like they need to understand everything. And so even though he's telling them the motivations, you could picture him being like, I'll tell them and they won't believe me. And that just proves my point. I don't fit into their little box. They still think I'm about money. What does it take to get you people off the bench and into the game? I keep trying. I keep telling you what I want and you're not doing it. So let's try something new.
He puts half the mob's money that he earned from working for them, puts it on a pile, tosses gasoline on it, sets it on fire. And then the look in the guy's eyes as he watches the money burn. And the Joker's just laughing at him because he's like, you are enslaved to this.
And the mob guys, one by one, learn the hard lesson that they're people, that the Joker understands they're people. Because they think, my people follow me because I'm not crazy. And the Joker's like, no, they're hungry dogs. And so he, one by one, like, he gets the Gambit's dudes to, like, join his team and betray Gambit. He gets the European dudes guy, the mobster with the dogs, like, his guys betray him, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Right. Even he like, throws the stick on the floor and says, we're going to have tryouts. I'm going to activate your ugly animal, like, survival instinct and use it against you.
Yeah. So how do they resolve? Here's the question I want to ask. How do they answer the tension between chaos and rules? We know that Dent breaks. How do Gordon and Batman, where does the film land with that rules versus chaos theme?
Batman, he's tempted, but he holds strong. I guess.
To his rule, yeah.
He holds strong to his rule. And he proves the Joker wrong. But not really. He has faith in the people of Gotham against all evidence.
Yeah.
And at that critical moment when, you know, you think you're waiting for one ship to blow up the other, and then the guy goes, give me that thing, I'm going to do what you should have done 10 minutes ago. You think he's going to pull the trigger. He throws the remote overboard.
Yeah.
Which is essentially saying, we're going to let the other boat live. And then the people on the civilian boat, that one guy who's kind of snaky, and he's like, well, why shouldn't we have our chance? And he goes up, he's like, well, I'll do it. I'll get my hands dirty if you people won't. He goes to do it, and then he doesn't. And he puts the box back, and then both boats choose to let the other boat live, and the Joker is like, wait. It doesn't compute for him, because he believes.
He truly wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He really believes that they're going to pull the trigger.
He actually, they call his bluff because he has like a manual trigger or whatever, but the boats don't explode automatically at midnight.
Yeah.
He truly was banking on, they're going to kill each other. That's his core belief. And when those people choose goodness in those boats, he does not have just like the whole film, we haven't had a category for the Joker. Suddenly he doesn't have a category for what happened on those boats. It doesn't really faze him that much. We don't get the satisfaction of him being like, I was wrong. You know, he's like, well, you got to do everything yourself. But we do have just a moment where he pauses. And that's enough for us to realize he's wrong. Ultimately, people are not just as filthy as him and animalistic. There is goodness here. People can rise to the occasion. We can endure. There is hope for humanity. And so it's not really Batman that saves the day, actually. It's the people who choose to step up to the plate and not give in to the fear and the chaos that he's constantly trying to unleash in them. Not just at them, but within them.
Whew. And Batman is vindicated because he believed in them the whole time. Joker's like, they're gonna blow up. And he even says, no, they're not. They're not going to.
Yeah, that's so true.
He believes in the people of Gotham, and he's willing to. I mean, he's not under any illusions that Gotham is twisted up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's his faith in, I guess, goodness, but also I think goodness in people.
It's not a naive faith. I would say Harvey Dent's attitude is more like, if I don't do it, no one will. I am the White Knight. Whereas Batman is always fighting. He always trusts Gordon. He's always ready to work with those little pockets of resistance of good against the evil that he finds. And he's humble enough to know, someday I'm going to hang up the cape. Whereas Dent is like, what did they say? The Russian ballerina is like, what if Harvey Dent is the man behind the cape?
Yeah.
You know, and they're like, what, are you really ready to take that mantle? He's like, maybe, if I'm up for it. Like, you cocky son of a gun. Like, that's a corny line, whatever. But I think it shows like Harvey actually, he's in the limelight and he is more conventional and he's holding out for reward and he thinks it's all on him. Batman actually is ready to do good even if no one notices. And that is what actually wins the day on those two ferry boats. It's actually true selflessness that they demonstrate.
Even if I don't get credit for being good. Because I guess if you don't pull the trigger and you die, you're not around to enjoy the reward of having done the right thing.
Yeah. It requires real selflessness. And that's incidentally what Batman shows as well. He says, okay, I don't want this. I want Rachel, but that hope is gone for him. And so he takes on the opprobrium of everyone to do the right thing. He really embraces what Batman can be, which is someone who operates outside of the law and order, and everyone hates him. And I think the scene that illustrates that perfectly is where he's punching the SWAT guys. And now he's fighting with law enforcement, really, for the first time, because they don't understand what's happening, but he's doing the right thing, and he's willing to be the outcast so that he can truly save lives. So, and that's the interplay between the White Knight and the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is actually willing to take on the opprobrium to do right. The White Knight is actually, at the end of the day, kind of doing it for the limelight. Not entirely, but that sneaks in enough to break him.
You know something? Even Bruce Wayne, billionaire, is a Dark Knight.
Yes. Go on.
Because Bruce Wayne is so annoying. You know, he's
he
an
really
arrogant
is.
buffoon. I mean, it's obviously it's fun to watch. Like when he shows up to the penthouse and is like, I believe in Harvey Dent. Come on, nice slogan, Harvey. Like he's laughing at him, and Rachel thinks he's laughing at him. But then he actually is like, but I believe in Harvey Dent.
He's got to make himself look like a turd so that he can actually do some good for Harvey right there.
He's 100% committed to pretending to be this awful jerk person. Because, but you know, he knows Alfred knows him and Rachel knows him. And I guess that's enough for him. And the hope of, you know, Rachel would have been with me.
Yep. Well, real goodness is about the other person and actually at his core. And we don't get this in this movie, but Bruce Wayne cares about Gotham. It's kind of the city that his parents built. And that's a core piece of Batman's motivation, is that actually he loves the city. He loves the people in the city. It's his home. He's Gotham's defender.
He feels responsible to protect it.
He does. Rightly so, because he has the ability to do something.
Yeah.
And so Batman Begins gives us that character motivation, and it's there in the background for him. So he has to choose the girl I love. And actually, her happiness would be better served by letting her marry Harvey Dent.
Yeah.
So he actually ends up, at his core, he's selfless in his love for the city. And that's what it takes. I think that's their answer to the rules versus chaos. It actually takes true selflessness to beat true evil.
Ooh.
And when it's mixed, you can have sort of mixed bag motives, like a mostly good DA beat a mostly bad mob. But when real evil comes to play, real selflessness is required to beat it.
Dang. Yeah.
Why did she kiss him and then tell him she would not be with him and then kiss another man? What was that?
This is more of a question. Was Rachel ever gonna tell Harvey that like she kissed Bruce? Like was that she ever gonna and also what a like flip-flop. Hot take, Rachel's not a good person? Question?
I think my hot take is that Harvey Dent's face, his eyeballs should have fallen out when it melted off. It was unrealistic. He shouldn't have had an eyeball.
Hot take, he really should have taken that skin graft because his face is going to get all infected with all of that hanging out there. Oh my goodness.
Hot take, it's kind of funny that we all just sat here for 2 hours and watched a man dressed up like a bat.
There's a big and awesome philosophical discussion to be had about the relationship between rules per se and just goodness. Because we all know that rules don't equate to goodness. Sometimes to do the right thing, you have to operate outside of the rules. And yet, we know that the universe, this gets into our worldview a little bit, the universe functions on a rule and order. And rules are actually good. They're a good thing. Limitations are always necessary for humans to thrive. We need rule of law. We need actually definition and boundaries around our lives so that we can know who we are, right? The other people around us sometimes box us in and make us feel suffocated, but actually we need them to determine who we are. You wouldn't know who you are unless your parents were constantly pouring that into you and bouncing your own actions off and back. Like, people need rules, and rules are a part of the tapestry of goodness. They're less than goodness, but goodness always does actually come back to some form of law and order.
Is it because rules, just like humans, are finite and limited, but goodness is transcendent?
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Like, you can't like, picture goodness is like the sky above. And the rules are like us trying to draw pictures of the sky, but we can only draw on a square of paper.
That's deep.
And it's good.
Yeah.
It's good to do this, but you can never put the sky on paper. And sometimes, like, you're going to have to color outside the lines. My metaphor's breaking down.
I think we're just totally in our Christian worldview here, but I think God is goodness. God is love. He is the moral definition for how the universe should go. And there's rules and there's order woven into just the tapestry of creation itself. It's like a bike chain that is actually on the gears and functioning properly. And evil isn't just like a label we attach to actions we don't like. It's more like that bike chain getting screwed up and coming off the gear and pinching your finger.
Right. Or not pulling the wheels.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, the order of creation and goodness actually go hand in hand. They're not quite the same thing, but they're married to each other. And so when we see someone like the Joker whose moral calculator is broken, we rightly don't just assume that. See, the element of the Joker that's so scary is that he represents the depths that human nature can go to on a strictly moral level, but also he's broken psychologically. And there's something not normal about him. There's something maybe that he didn't quite choose, even though he's running with it or whatever. But we know that, like, you're not really within the boundaries of normal, what humans should be. So he's psychologically broken too.
Yeah. Well, because he doesn't believe he's missing the goodness. He doesn't believe that goodness exists. He believes that only, brute force and violence exist.
Yeah. He's a psychopath, in other words. I mean, that's the fastest way to say it. He's a psychopath.
Yeah.
You've said this so many times on the podcast. I love it. Stories are where we wrestle with the hard problems of human existence.
Yep.
We were talking about that actually with the group we watched this with, our friends, and it was like, is it wrong to portray a villain this psychotic? Ooh. And I feel like there's a good and healthy difference between this and like a true crime.
Do you think it's wrong to portray a villain like this? Because my instinct, and this is tricky because this particular character has some baggage in the real world.
Yeah.
Like Heath Ledger, supposedly, we can't know if this is true, but at least the narrative is that, the narrative that people kind of remember is that Heath Ledger, in performing this role, like, it messed him up. And might have been one of the factors that led to his tragic suicide. But then further, it also inspired the shooter in Golden at that movie theater on the opening of the next movie to dress like the Joker and then perform an act of atrocious violence. So this character has baggage. But with that said, what do you think? Does that make it wrong to portray it this way?
It's a great question to ask, because there are lines that we should draw about what we should show in visual media, right? My take, Carlin, though, is that this movie does redeem some of the sickening displays of violence that the villains perpetrate with a morally sound message that it's actually driving at. And so as Christians, I think we can look at Scripture as a good example. There are so many depictions of brutality actually in Scripture. And you have to ask, like, why is this in here? What's the point? Because the ultimate narrative of Scripture is never to excuse or condone those things or to glamorize or glorify those things. It's actually there to just tell us the truth about human beings and human nature. If we don't tell the truth about human nature, we're at risk of perpetrating the things that we're trying to actually combat. But it's a fine line. Our punching bag on this show is the new Joaquin Phoenix Joker movies, right?
I was hoping you'd bring this up.
Patently irresponsible with the story of the Joker because they do glamorize it. They do sort of vindicate, like, he's a victim who had bad stuff happen to him. And so what did you expect? Of course he's going to kill someone. Okay, every murderer in the world should love that message.
Yeah.
I was justified. They pushed me too hard. Whereas the real moral calculus that we all know actually to be true, whether or not we all know it is true, is that murder is not justified.
Yes, ever.
Limited violence within the rule of law might be justified at times to stop evildoers, but vengeful murder, retribution like that, not justified. And so those movies show horrible things and they land in the wrong spot. Those movies, I'm not surprised, and I do think it's indefensible when they create copycats. I think anyone who watches the Dark Knight trilogy and ends up wanting to be like the Joker, I would say is like a collateral. It's not actually what the movie is about. The movie is about rising above those things, and it's meant to show us, it's meant to contrast the Dark Knight with the brightness of the dawn that comes at the very end. And not for 1 second are we meant to look up to the villain, to imitate the villain. We're meant to be intimidated and fearful and actually a little bit awestruck and impressed by the villain's intelligence. But I think the film, for the most part, my instinct says, does that more or less responsibly, which is not to say everyone should go watch this movie. I think viewer discretion totally advised. Just like different parts of scripture, I'm not going to read to my son until he's old enough to understand those elements of the world. But I want him to be ready for them because movies are where we grapple with the hard problems of human life. Stories are where we grapple.
Why do you think the Joker does have magnetism?
Yes. Because this movie, despite portraying a villain that I think gets as close to like pure evil as you can get of anything I've ever read or seen, it's a sympathetic character in the sense that when the Joker speaks truth to people who are deluded, there's that splash in the face of truth a little bit. And like you said, he never really fully lies to anyone. So when he calls the mob cowards, he's right, they're cowards. And when truth is spoken, people are meant to go, wow, that's true. And when he says, you and I, Batman, are on a different level than everyone else, don't pretend. Like, Batman's play acting. He's like, you're a scum who murders for money. Totally not true. Batman should know better than that. And Joker's like, don't pretend. Okay, wow, we're really, there's truth there. And when the Joker calls out that animal instinct in everyone that's gross and terrible, and everyone wants to pretend like it's not there, there is something true about that. But half a truth, as the saying goes, is often a great lie. And so we can appreciate that a good villain clarifies and is a good foil to real goodness. So there's a piece where, you can get addicted to the fear. You can watch this movie for the wrong reasons. And maybe that's another piece of art too. It's not just about creating it responsibly. It's about consuming it responsibly. And if you're not in a headspace that can consume this responsibly, you shouldn't. If you're a kind of person, maybe you've been wounded in your life. Maybe you're someone with deep trauma that isn't healed. And maybe you wouldn't lead with this, or maybe you would in a ironic way or whatever, but something about the Joker appeals to you because he's the underdog and he's the outcast and he, speaks the truth and he's smarter than everybody and he's calling everyone on their crap. If that's appealing to you, maybe you should take a look at what's going on in your heart and what your real motivations are.
Dang. And I think we can all be honest and say we all have moments like that where it's like the Joker in us.
That's true.
The sin nature in us. When you get in a funk and you're just like you just kind of hate the world and you just want to be upset and you just want to be mean to people. And I think we all have moments like that. And then we also have moments of clarity where you're disgusted with, oh, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I thought that. And that's because goodness is real, but we are all fallen creatures. that have the image of God and like a light of conscience implanted by God in our hearts. And this war, this war inside of us, like Paul says, the goodness I want to do, I don't do, and the evil I don't want to do, I do.
Yeah.
But you can feed the two dogs. You remember the two dogs analogy? The idea is that, you have two dogs, and whichever one you feed is going to get stronger. So if you feed the dog of darkness, it can become stronger and stronger. And if you feed the dog of like virtue and light,
the dog of darkness. No, that's so true. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the biggest takeaways from a Christian worldview is that this film is an incredible look at human nature. And when Jesus says narrow is the road that leads to life and very few find it, he's first of all talking about himself literally. It's hard to follow Jesus. He's the narrow path. But he's also describing goodness and evil. Part of what the Joker does is rip off the facade of everyone where they think we're basically good people. And he shows how rare real goodness is. It is rare. That is a truth about life. There's a Princeton professor named Robert P. George. He would always every year ask his class, okay, how many of you think you would be an abolitionist? And every hand goes up. And he's like, okay, how many of you have ever done something that cost you financially, like you would lose a job to do the right thing? How many of you have ever done something that would cost you even one friend to do the right thing? How many of you have been in a situation where your society loathes you and actually paints you as the villain, and the major institutions of your society kick you out and you can't be a member to do the right thing? Show me an example where you've done that in your life and I might believe you. Because the real abolitionists were hated. They were absolutely despised. I think that just shows, like, in real life, goodness is rare.
Yeah.
And so when The Dark Knight kind of crystallizes that for us, I actually think that's a truth of this movie.
Yes.
Right? The other themes that we didn't get to, Carlin, but I think we've basically talked about this whole time, have to do with hope and endurance, right? Like staying the course. I don't like saying that such and such is like a Christ figure, but I have to say, when Batman takes on the opprobrium of the whole establishment of Gotham in order to do the right thing, and he's kicked out and he's running for his life, I did think about, okay, the suffering servant, right? From Isaiah 53, Jesus was that suffering servant. Yes. Surely he took on our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted, but he was pierced for our transgressions, right? That whole thing about, like, he's the hero Gotham needs, not the one it deserves. They don't deserve a hero this good, right? But he is, and he's going to do what they need, even if they don't understand it and they hate him. Like, okay, that is Jesus. Jesus, on one level, it goes two directions. One, Jesus set that typography in the Western mind by basically creating the Western mind. So that's trickling down in all our psyches. On the other hand, that's just deep down true about life. That oftentimes we hate the ones who are trying to do good. And we need someone actually to save us. Like John chapter 1 says, this is the verdict. Light came into the world, but people love darkness instead of light because our deeds are evil. And so the best person who ever lived, Jesus, came into the world and was rejected by the world. And so just doing the right thing does not mean you're going to live with the appreciation and gratitude of a grateful world,
No. And that, oh man, it's crystallized so much in this movie, which is why his goodness rings out true, because it's goodness for goodness sake. He's never going to get a thank you from the people that he's saving. But Jesus, I mean, I kept thinking about this at the end, like Jesus endured, the rejection of his friends, a false trial, a horrible, torturous death, and ultimately the rejection of God, the wrath of God poured out on him. But he did it for the joy set before him. And then, he's raised up to the heights of heaven because he was willing to humble himself down. And so what we don't get to see in the end of The Dark Knight, which is true about reality, is that at the end, glory goes to the one who deserves it. Because of his humility and because of his sacrifice.
Jesus can take it in a unique way. He's a superhero in that none of us could take on the guilt of humanity and be the scapegoat, right? Like literally Batman is the scapegoat. In ancient Jewish law, they would have a goat that they brought in, and the priest would lay hands on the goat and lay the sins of the whole people on this goat, and then they'd banish it into the wilderness. That is a type established by God in Jewish law in order to prepare us for what Jesus would literally do on the cross one day for my sin and yours. Like the things we've done wrong were literally laid on him. He became the scapegoat for humanity. Anyway, we just got to point that out. Like that is so crystal clear in The Dark Knight. He's literally the scapegoat at the end. So anyway,
this movie is pretty ambitious, you know, to tackle such huge concepts and to play the Dark Knight and the White Knight against each other and like good and evil and the pure like symbolism of it. It's addressing like the biggest themes that we could possibly wrap our minds around.
Yeah, it's taken a swing and honestly hitting it out of the park. And I just got to tip my hat again to Christopher Nolan, because that's what he did for filmmaking in the 2000s and 2010s. Like he's like, no, we can handle these enormous themes. Like think of The Prestige,
Inception,
Interstellar, the Dark, the Batman, Inception. Like, yeah, he's not afraid to step up to the plate, and he has the skill to deliver. Whereas future generations of people who inherited the Batman franchise really wanted to hit a home run. They were really trying, but they just didn't quite have the filmmaking skill of Chris Nolan.
Well, it's rare, It's rare to find a true genius. It's like once in a generation, maybe,
Truly.
So Casey, let's flip a coin, huh? Let's flip a coin to see what happens.
Heads, we end the episode. Tails, we keep talking forever. All right, ready? Flip. Oh, it was heads. Okay. Hey, we'll see you guys next time on another episode of Cinema Snorkel.
Hot take. The movie ended when they died after falling off the penthouse and landing on the car. And that's where that happened.